All right. Verse 36. Then one of the Pharisees invited Jesus to eat with him, and he entered the Pharisee's house and reclined at the table. When a sinful woman from that town learned that Jesus was dining there, she brought an alabaster jar of perfume. As she stood behind him at his feet weeping, she began to wet his feet with her tears and wipe them with her hair. Then she kissed his feet and anointed them with the perfume. When the Pharisee who had invited Jesus saw this, he said to himself, "If this man were a prophet, he would know who this is and what kind of woman is touching him, for she is a sinner." But Jesus answered him, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. "Two men were debtors to a certain moneylender. One owed him 500 denarii and the other 50. When they were unable to repay him, he forgave both of them. Which one then will love him more?" "I suppose the one who was forgiven more," Simon replied. "You have judged correctly," Jesus said. And turning toward the woman, he said to Simon, "Do you see this woman? When I entered your house, you did not give me water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. You did not greet me with a kiss, but she has not stopped kissing my feet since I arrived. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with perfume. Therefore I tell you, because her many sins have been forgiven, she has loved much. But he who has been forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to her, "Your sins are forgiven." But those at the table began to say to themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" And Jesus told the woman, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace." Let's pray. God, I thank you for another opportunity to come together as a church, as a body of believers to worship you without fear of persecution or being hurt, whatever. We can just come freely to you to hear more and to learn more about you. I pray that we would not take this opportunity for granted. Pray that we would hear what you have for us this morning, for each one of us, whatever it may be, that you would speak to each person here. In your name we pray. Amen. Now you may be seated. So I want to set the stage a little bit this morning. Understanding the way this setting is really adds a lot of value to the story. And I think oftentimes we read Bible stories and we ignore the culture and the setting that was going on at the time. And so I love being able to put us there. And I really want us to be in this story this morning. I want us to imagine ourselves there watching this unfold. All right, so first I want to clarify that this story is most likely, I'm pretty sure not, the same story that we read about in the other three Gospels. We read a very similar story in Matthew, Mark, and John, but all of those point to happening in the city of Bethany, or in the town of Bethany, at a man named Simon the leper. This story in Luke happens at the house of Simon the Pharisee and was most likely somewhere in Galilee. Hopefully you can see this okay. So earlier in Luke 7, the reason why I say this is most likely different. So earlier in Luke 7, Jesus raises a son to life. And that happens up here in the city of Nain. And then after that, we're told that John's disciples come and ask Jesus, "Are you the one we should that we expected, or should we be looking for someone else?" Matthew points to that fact of happening up here in Galilee, in this whole region up here. Bethany is all the way down here, okay? 50 miles away. So I'm pretty sure this is a completely different story. We can argue about that later if we really think that it's necessary. As mentioned, this takes place in a Pharisee's house named Simon. So we've already heard during Sunday school, my dad mentioned asking the question why. Gene mentioned asking the question why. And I wondered, why would a Pharisee want Jesus in his home? I could come up with 3 reasons. The first one, Jesus was annoying these guys. They didn't like him. 2 chapters ago in Luke chapter 5, Jesus healed a paralytic, and then he forgave his sins. And the religious leaders wondered, what kind of blasphemy is this? Who does this guy think he is? So now what they want to do is build a case against Jesus so that they can somehow be rid of him. So it very well could be that Simon wanted Jesus to come into his home and relax. Maybe he could get him to slip up. Maybe he could get him to say something or do something that he could go and tell his fellow Pharisees and religious leaders, this guy did this. The second reason, Jesus was becoming popular. It was common in those days for the popular people, the people of status, to have other popular people over. They could talk about things, and it could boost the host's ego and his popularity among the locals there. So Jesus was becoming quite popular. Could Simon have maybe wanted to lift himself up a little bit? And the third, Simon was like the Pharisee Nicodemus and had a genuine interest in getting to know Jesus better in his teachings. In my opinion, I would lean towards option 1 with maybe some hints of option 2. If he indeed was like Nicodemus, why would he have been so bold to have Jesus to his home when Nicodemus came to him at night? If he was like Nicodemus, why would we read this story of all these insults and offensive things that Simon didn't do for Jesus? The things that were common courtesy at the time. Whatever his motivation, Simon invites Jesus over for dinner, and Jesus agrees. So let's continue building this scene. You might notice that it said that they reclined at the table. So this is probably what that would have looked like. Not our normal Sunday afternoon setting. They would have had a table, and it probably was about the height of a coffee table, lower to the ground than what we're used to eating at. They would have put cushions or mattresses, big ones, around the table for people to lay on, and then they would have pillows that they could lean on. And if you'll notice, most of them are leaning towards the left-hand side. Now, I don't know if that was a thing. I read somewhere that was a thing, and then they all look towards the one person, and even the people on the other side, they're leaning on their right side, but they should have been leaning on their left. I don't know if there's anything significant about that. I just read that was the normal way to recline at the table. So anyways, there were 2 reasons for doing this. Maybe more, but 2 that I found. One is, it keeps your feet as far away from the food as possible. Now, in a lot of other cultures, feet are offensive. In Thailand, we could never sit with our feet like this because the bottom of your foot is offensive if someone is on that side of you. So, as a man, which I never did because I still haven't gotten comfortable with it, you would cross like this and keep your foot pointed to the ground. Feet in a lot of other cultures is not respectful. So keep them as far away from the table as possible. You don't sit cross-legged. They'd be right there by the table. Keep them farther away from the table. The other reason is that mealtime would often go fairly long. And so this was more comfortable for the guests as they sat there and discussed different things. All right? So we're building the scene. Something else that's interesting, you can't really tell in this picture, you can tell the room's pretty big. Oftentimes, this table was set up in a courtyard or a very large room. And the reason for that is so that the neighbors, the friends, the random people off the street could come in and surround the table. They wouldn't eat. They wouldn't participate in the conversation. They would just stand there. Weird, right? This is a different culture. This is normal for them, all right? If you go to another country, as a foreigner, if you're standing out compared to whatever race you might be in as far as the country goes, you'll be surprised to see how many people are willing to stop when you're eating a meal. It's not weird for them. It wasn't weird for them. They didn't have entertainment. This was their TV. They didn't have Netflix and chill. They didn't have Apple Music. This was their entertainment. So it was normal. Why would you want to go do that? This was your entertainment. Why would you want to stand around and listen to someone's conversation? Why would the host want this to happen? Well, remember, this is people of status who do this. So as religious leaders, this is the way to get people educated about your religious beliefs. Maybe they walk home and they make a new commitment to the beliefs of that day. Or, like I said, this could boost their ego, their popularity. Hey, look who's coming to our house. You can come over and listen in on the conversation. It all sounds weird to us, and it's only going to get worse. But this is normal, all right? And I want this all, hopefully you're starting to picture yourself there. You're one of the crowd watching this unfold. So, moving into the story, a sinful woman hears about this. Jesus is at Simon's house. Knowing that people were able to just come in makes a little bit more sense than why would she burst through the door? That's how I always envision this. Some lady, like, what nerve does she have bursting in on these room of possibly just men and interrupting their meal? No, she was there, standing with who knows how many other people. Now, it's common thinking that this woman was a prostitute, and I'm not sure where we get that, because all we're told is that she's a sinful woman. And the word woman can actually be translated as wife. Not necessarily saying that she was a wife, but it can be. So this could have been a sinful wife. She moves into the room and she stands at Jesus' feet. And so let's say Jesus is the one who everyone's looking at. She's standing at his feet. All right, once again, we're there. We see her. She's standing there. And the reason why we see her is because she's weeping. And that word weeping literally means wail aloud. Imagine the worst crying you've ever heard. That's what this woman's doing. Or worse, if you haven't heard horrible crying. She's weeping. She's wailing aloud. Everyone is seeing her. The people at the table are hearing her. People around are like, I'm trying to listen here. Can you go? Can you leave? Why is she weeping? It says that she was weeping so much, her feet wet Jesus' feet. Her tears wet Jesus' feet. So you imagine her crying, her head's down, tears are falling. And wet means literally rain or send rain. She is raining. Once again, in my envisionment of this in the past, what is she doing to his feet? A couple tears? That's not doing anything. No, she's wailing aloud, raining tears down on Jesus' feet. She notices this, drops to her knees, takes down her hair, and wipes his feet. Now, this could be one reason why we think that she's a prostitute, or why it's commonly thought, because women did not wear their hair down in public. Never. If a woman did, she was a prostitute. I could go into detail of what this equivalent is for us today. The rabbis said this is cause for divorce if a woman had her hair down. So imagine what it takes today to be that immodest. That's the significance here in a room full of people. She may have been a prostitute and come in that way, but I wonder how would she have gotten through the door? Because she would have been identified just by that trait. So there's a very good possibility her hair was up and she took it down. She is so in the moment, she's not even thinking straight. This scene is just getting more and more odd. After drying off Jesus' feet, she kisses his feet and then pours perfume on his feet. And all this takes place and no one says anything. Luke points us to Simon's thoughts. Simon's thoughts are, of course, critical towards the woman, but he is also critical towards Jesus, but not in the way that you would expect. If a woman would come through this door right now and come up and kiss me, you guys, Oh, man, things got tense all of a sudden just right there. Exactly. That's what would happen. What has Josh gotten himself into? Jess be like, Josh, you got some splaining to do. That's what I would hear. But Simon doesn't even go there. What is Simon's thought? Jesus is ignorant. He's not a prophet. He would know that this woman is a sinner. And the only reason why I point this out is because this is the significance of the life of Jesus on the people around him. You realize how many encounters Jesus had with women? He was never accused of immoral relations with a woman. He was never accused of anything of that type. His worst enemies, their accusation, the guy's ignorant. He doesn't know who's touching him. You guys wouldn't think that. You might think when the woman walks up, wow, she's pretty forward. But your thoughts would be critical of me and what I've gotten myself involved in. But that's not where they go, because that's the life that Jesus lived. Everyone saw it. They saw Jesus living a life so pure that even his worst enemies couldn't take their accusations there. Even though Simon doesn't go to that accusation, he deems this confirmation that Jesus is not a prophet. It's what he wanted. That's the slip up. Finally, Jesus breaks the silence and speaks to Simon. And he speaks to his thoughts. And he tells him a quick story. Two men. One owed a guy 10 times more than the other. The lender forgave both. It was unpayable. They didn't have the money to pay for it. The lender forgave both. Who loves the lender more? And Simon's answer is hilarious, because I think he thought Jesus was trying to trick him. I'm pretty sure no matter what version you read this in, he hesitates. It's an obvious answer, but he says, I suppose the one who was forgiven more. I can imagine Jesus being like, very good, Simon. But Jesus was using this story to get Simon to admit a principle. Great love comes from great forgiveness. Now, I imagine Jesus telling that story in his parable-like way. And then he contrasts Simon with the woman. And I can imagine Jesus becoming very serious. When I entered your house, you did not give me water for my feet, but she wet my feet with her tears and wiped them with her hair. When someone invited guests into their home, we already talked about how you wanted your feet further away from the table, right? Well, when someone invited their guests from their home, people had been walking on dusty, dirty, poop-filled roads. So it stank. It was disgusting. So they did their thing and they washed their feet. Now, you can't even imagine how bad this is, because when we wash our feet, all of us make sure the toenails are trimmed, the feet are clean. Imagine someone walking in who's been wearing flip-flops for a week. Be pretty dirty. All right? Simon chose not to do this for Jesus. You did not greet me with a kiss, but she has not stopped kissing my feet since I arrived. You did not anoint my head with oil, but she has anointed my feet with perfume. It was also common courtesy to kiss your guests on the cheek and to pour a little bit of oil on their head. But Simon chose not to do these things either. Imagine it like this. I invite you over for supper. You show up, you knock on the door. No one answers. You know someone's inside. You can hear noise. So you open the door. You peek, hello? And maybe I say hello, but I don't get up from my seat. You walk in, you see me and the family are watching a football game on TV. We don't stand up to welcome you to our house. We don't take your coat. We don't offer you a place on the couch to sit. How many of you would feel like I want you there? Raise your hands high. Mary Lou. All right, I know how to treat you when we get next week. No. You wouldn't feel it. You would feel very unwelcome and uncomfortable, and I'm guessing most of us would probably leave. This is what Jesus is feeling. None of the common courtesies have been given to him, all right? So Jesus sitting there, knowing that he's not welcome, feeling very uncomfortable, and now Jesus starts comparing Simon's actions to this woman's. Jesus points out she loves much because she's been forgiven much, which is why she's willing to express her love in such an extravagant way. Simon didn't love Jesus all that much because he wasn't forgiven as much, and it showed when he refused to offer Jesus these common courtesies. But Simon not being forgiven of much isn't necessarily true. In Jesus' story, a detail we miss: both debts were unpayable. If I owe someone $10,000 and Bryce owes someone $1 million and neither one of us has a penny to our name, we're both in the same boat. Neither one of us can pay the debt. We can sit here and focus on the size. Well, it was $550. No, they couldn't pay the debt. Simon's debt of sin may not have been as great as the woman's, but it was just as unpayable. James 2:10 says, "Whoever keeps the whole law but stumbles at just one point is guilty of breaking all of it." So according to that verse, the woman may have broken all 10 commandments, but if Simon breaks one, equally guilty. Simon didn't see it this way, and I'm assuming most of us don't actually see it this way. So let's do a comparison, and this is familiar probably to us all. Let's say we have two people, 25 years old. One was raised in a Christian family. The other has lived a wicked, godless life. Simon, a.k.a. the one raised in a Christian home, is a pretty good person. He's never spent a night in jail, never stole anything, never did drugs. Sure, he's made some minor mistakes, but for the most part, he's lived a pretty good life. The sinful woman, a.k.a. the wicked, godless person, has spent nights in jail. They have done drugs. They lived a life full of sin. Both go to a service at a local church, and both turn their lives over to Christ after the service. You're probably not going to see much change in Simon, are you? But you will see significant change in the woman. Simon acknowledges that he's a sinner, but he never did anything really bad, so he thinks Jesus doesn't need to forgive him as much. And that's not literal thought, but that's what Jesus is pointing out here, all right? I don't think Simon, he's critical of the sinner, but he's not saying, oh, well, I haven't sinned that much. Let me see, 1, 2, 3. Yeah, that's not that bad. That's not what this is a subconscious thing. This is just something that he does, okay? The sinful woman acknowledges that she's a sinner and recognizes that she has done a lot of bad things. So she knows how much forgiveness she needs. Their perspectives are different, so their love towards Jesus is different. This is why the woman is willing to create such a scene with her love for Jesus. She knows what she's been saved from, so she's more extravagant with her love towards God. Jesus has forgiven much, and so she loves much. Simon, raised in a Christian home, doesn't recognize what he's been saved from. His debt was as unpayable as hers. Both debts are unpayable. This is the perspective I'm trying to get us to come to this morning. In our head, we acknowledge that we are all sinners. But how many times do your thoughts go the direction of Simon? I was talking with Jess about this and asking her, how do I get this point across without being blunt? We sit here, and in our head, we say and do all the right things. Simon did all the right things in life. He was a Pharisee, someone looked up to as religious. But where's his heart? We don't see any expression of love. So we can sit here and we can say in our head, yeah, no, we get it, Josh. We get it. We're all sinners. I see it. But how many times do our thoughts run to the same place as Simon? How many times are we critical of someone and their life of sin? Flip side, how many times are we critical of someone's extravagant display of love towards Jesus? we look at this woman and her display of love. And many of us can't even put ourselves there. I should have put the quote down. Spurgeon said in the debate about whether this just happened one time and all four Gospels were talking about the same time, Spurgeon's like, why is this such a big deal? It's two different people. We should be in awe that it didn't happen more often if people would realize what they've been saved from. We look at this display of love and we think this would be weird, this would be awkward, and we come up with 100 other ways to show our love to Jesus. Something that won't be extravagant or embarrassing. You know what? I'm going to stand outside the door, and when Jesus walks out, thank you, Jesus, so much for what you've done for me. I appreciate it. We've done our part. And then we visit a church where people might dance during worship. What a scene they are creating. What a distraction they're causing. I'll show my love to Jesus with my hands in my pockets. I'll sing. I'm not trying to be critical if you sing with your hands in your pocket. I'm not trying to be critical of us who have been raised in a Christian home. That is a gift. What I want us to grasp is that way too often, because we've been raised in a Christian home, we run to the place of Simon. Do you have any idea who that person is? I know. Back when they were 18, they did this. Do you have any idea what that person's involved with right now? I know. How many times do we run to that place? It's a gift to be raised in a Christian home. It's okay to sing with your hands in your pockets. But don't run to the place where we're critical of someone who's extravagantly displaying their love for Jesus, because it's a little bit different than what we're used to, what we grew up in. We could pull different challenges from this story. There's a lot. You've heard this story before, and you've heard the messages and the different challenges. My question to you, the challenge to me, is your love, is my love for Jesus displayed in my actions? If you take a close look at your life, do you see that the love you claim up here to have for Jesus is displayed in your heart through your actions? Your action or your inaction might tell you how you view your debt. Is it big or little? It comes down to your perspective. Each one of us, whether raised in that Christian home or living sin for half of our life, has an unpayable debt to Jesus, to God. It doesn't matter if you owe 500 or 50, it's unpayable. There's nothing you can do to right that. So God makes a plan to forgive that unpayable debt. He'll make the ultimate sacrifice, and he'll offer his son Jesus on the cross to die so that our debt goes away. But you know what's incredible? Our debt doesn't just go away. Someone always has to pay the debt. Always. If you owe your friend $10,000 and he says, I forgive it, the debt didn't just disappear, your friend just paid the debt. In our story today, the debt didn't disappear, the lender paid the debt. God made a plan to pay your debt. It doesn't matter if you owe 500 or 50. As Jesus was whipped, beaten, put on a cross, and left there to die, he was taking on our debt. He was paying that debt. He was taking on Simon's debt and the woman's debt. And there's only one way for that debt to be paid in full, and that was Jesus' death on the cross. And that's why he was willing to go that far. You want to talk about an extravagant showing of love? Right there. And yet, we would be embarrassed to get down on our knees, crying at the feet of Jesus, pouring perfume on his feet, because that's extravagant. When our perspective changes and we see that the 50 is as unpayable as the 500, when we see that when we break one law, we're guilty of breaking them all, then we become more aware of the sin which we have been forgiven. Then we see that it cost Jesus the same amount of blood, the same pain, the same suffering to forgive the debt of the raised in a Christian family as it did to forgive the debt of the one who lived the wicked, godless life. Our perspective needs to change. So how do we change our perspective to be more like the woman's than Simon's? How do we get to the distracting, extravagant love of the woman versus the hands in the pocket, critical love of Simon? Well, unfortunately, too many of us are perfectly content with our hands in our pockets. We don't want to cause a scene with our love for Jesus. We don't want it to get weird. But for those of you who are interested in loving Jesus the way this woman did, maybe this can help. It's not as significant or extravagant as what we see. This woman may have been saved earlier that week. I don't know. The story puts it in the past tense, so she was saved before she came into that room. So it might be extravagant for someone like that. For us, who maybe have struggled with Simon's thinking, this is how it has to change. The more we love Jesus, the more we see how sinful we are. The more we see how sinful we are, the more we see how forgiven we are. And the more we see how forgiven we are, the more we love Jesus. And the more we love Jesus, the more sinful we see that we are. And the more sinful we see we are, the more forgiven we see that we are. And the more forgiven that we are, the more we love Jesus. And the more we love Jesus, you see this? It keeps going. If you've ever said, I've arrived, if you've ever thought you've arrived, you've stopped loving Jesus. Because the more you love Jesus, the more sinful you see yourself. And the more sinful you see yourself, the more you the more you see that you've been forgiven from Jesus. And the more forgiven you are, the more you love Jesus. And it just keeps on going. How do you love Jesus more? I'm so glad you asked. But you may not like the answer. Love without action is meaningless. Love without action is meaningless. Landon and Sophie are not here this morning, but I guarantee you, Landon went out of his way to express to Sophie that he liked her, to express to her that he loved her. He didn't do that by never calling her, never texting her. He didn't do that by just continuing to work. No, he started liking a girl, so he did something extra. He did something out of the norm. He started loving a girl, a woman. Sorry, Sophie, if you're watching. He started loving a woman, and he went out of his way to prove that to her. And that's how she's able to say yes to him when he says, do you want to spend the rest of your life with me? Because he went out of his way to prove his love had action. You have to do more than just show up on Sunday morning and listen to Jason and I talk. We can't do it for you. So you maybe start teaching Sunday school as that extra boost of love that you want to show Jesus. Or the media department is looking for another team member to help run PowerPoint on Sunday mornings. If you feel a tap on the shoulder, then maybe act. Show Jesus some love. Because that's as much of a ministry as what I'm doing here. That's as much of a ministry as doing something out on the streets of Goshen. So step up. do something crazy. Maybe you break out of the normal by volunteering at Retta or the food pantry. Maybe you break out of the normal by going to your neighbors and telling them about Jesus. Ooh, it's scary, right? Well, I can imagine this woman was pretty scared to show her love for Jesus in a room full of people, especially the host who condemns her. But you know what? You keep doing that. When it starts to get too normal and you're ready to move from liking the girl to loving the girl, you got to do something out of the norm. You have to express it. You have to act on it. And you keep that cycle going throughout the rest of your life. And someday you might do something just as crazy as this woman because you love Jesus that much. Because the more you love Jesus, the more you saw how sinful you are. And the more you saw how sinful you are, the more you saw how forgiven you are. And the more you saw how forgiven you are, the more you love Jesus. And it just keeps going. It just keeps going. It never ends.